let's wrap up a little bit more from the season here. I do want to pull up the final 20 games from the year where the Canucks played pretty well. They had a 13-5-2 record over the final 20 games of the season. Here's the interesting stat from those 20 games. Of the 13 wins they had, I circled them here for everyone on YouTube. They only beat 3 playoff teams in those 13 wins. So, hey, a 13-5-2 record. Is that good, Harm? You're a numbers guy. 13-5-2 is a pretty good record. I would take that. The unfortunate thing is, we all talked about this at the halfway point of the season. We talked about this when Rick Tocchet was hired. This was not going to be a tough schedule that really challenged the players to step up and play in these big moments. And in the big moments they had, they only beat playoff teams 3 times. So how much can you really take from the final 20 games here and think that it's sustainable? It can be moved into next season. We touched on a few things off the top. Pettersson's play, Demko getting back. That's all great. JT Miller playing a little bit better. But is there anything else you can take away from these past 20 that are actually, in your eyes, for sure going to happen next season on this team that are positive?
Well, the most important one is Demko.
Yeah.
Right? Especially coming back from injury. If he struggled down the stretch again, we'd be hesitant, right? You'd probably even have conversations about, like, some would wonder, should they trade? Like, should they trade?
Yep.
And of course now it's like there's no chance of that happening. That's huge because this team, to win something next season, they're going to need exceptional goaltending. It's the bottom line, and the form that he showed was the Demko that we're used to. So I think that's the most important takeaway in terms of what I'm confident in will actually translate to next season. Beyond that, obviously, we know Pettersson and Hughes were fantastic the whole season, as was Kuzmenko. That'll translate to next season in terms of, that trio being able to drive the bus for this team offensively. Obviously, JT Miller sort of turning things around. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's important because if he struggled at center through the second half of the season again, especially after trading Horvat, and you're looking at him as, oh boy, might have to play him at wing, that's where he's better at, then all of a sudden, red flags. You're really worried about the situation. So I think that's important. Beyond that, from a team perspective, because of the soft schedule, because we saw them going to Taron to Boudreau and it didn't translate to next season, I'm not going to try reading too much into it both ways, right? I'm not going to look at this and say, oh, this is phony. This doesn't mean anything, because the club did show strides in terms of playing more responsibly, playing a more diligent style under Tocchet, and I'm optimistic about the impact that he can have next season. But these games also don't mean anything. They're against softer competition. And we've seen that this group last year struggled out of the gate when the games actually mattered. So I'm not going to read too much into it from a team perspective.
I think what I'm questioning for next season, specifically from the pushover from this year into next season, there was a lot of talk about this being an extended training camp, this being a time for the players to learn the system a little bit before. I think that can help more with Tocchet than it did with Boudreau. So I will be optimistic about that. But I also wonder if they did enough in these final, however many games it was with Tocchet here, about half the season. Did they do enough to really exhaust all avenues of making this a training camp? Did they give players opportunities enough? Like they did a lot of, like, hey, listen, Akito Hirose getting a chance to play NHL minutes late in the season, top 4 minutes, really. Him on the power play, that was all great. But did they do enough trial and error from the current roster that they have to think that that is like a training camp going into next season? I don't know if they did enough just trying different things in the final games here. I feel like it was more about this training camp, and maybe that's my fault from the way I would read how I'd like to see a team operate in a training camp. Maybe this was more about the structure, how this team wants to play, what you have to do in certain situations, instead of just giving bodies different opportunities.